The Dinari ship Noala docked at Space Station 6 to take on a load of construction equipment and workers. The clients were a religious sect of Menics, an avian species that took astrology to a whole new level. They based their colonization policies, laws, and trial outcomes on mystics who read messages in the stars, planets, moons, comets, and even meteorites. Captain Voon, a large crab-like creature, motioned to the small mammal clerk, Purg, who resembled an otter. Summon Oxidize. I need to speak to him about his behavior regarding the Menic. I need to ensure that he does not offend them. Purg held out a data tablet. Captain, I anticipated your request and have supplied Oxidize with all the necessary information regarding Menic culture and acceptable social interactions. Here is a copy of the information given. Voon placed the tablet into a console and scanned the information quickly with his 6 eyes. After a few moments, he spoke. Normally this would be sufficient, but the human is unpredictable and problematic. In this case, direct verbal communication may be redundant but is probably necessary. Purg shuffled his data tablets. Sir, given the frequent issues involving Oxidize, have you considered replacing him with another human? Voon made a series of low clicks that sounded more like clunks, showing irritation. The problem is that all humans are equally problematic. The key to using them effectively is to find one with the desired skill set and monitor it to prevent danger or offensive communication. Purg clicked his own teeth. Then perhaps we shouldn't have a human at all. Voon emitted several more clunks punctuated with an almost scraping noise. Purg grew alarmed, realizing his impertinence. Many apologies, Captain. I spoke shamefully. I do not question your decisions. I am simply unable to comprehend the nuances of the situation. Voon realized he was intimidating the small mammal. He paused, then purposefully gave some quiet clicks as when focused on a task. Your confusion is inoffensive. Humans are enigmatic. However, when consensus is reached with such a bizarre creature involved, the outcome will be most favorable. The Dinari believed in a democratic method of leadership. The main purpose of a leader was to keep order among group members so that the group could come to a consensus about policy. However, history had proven that when a group did not have a diversity of ideas and values, consensus tended to favor rigid philosophies and failed to address legitimate concerns of those who did not strictly adhere to the rigid philosophy. For this reason, Dinari leaders tried to include diverse members into their organization, even though it sometimes resulted in friction and frustration. Humans were extremely diverse, both from other species and from each other. Their contributions to consensus were extremely valuable if one had the patience to endure them. Purg bobbed his head in relief. I shall fetch Oxidize immediately, Captain. What task would you like me to perform next? Voon sighed like a great bellows. I must interact with Oxidize first to assess necessary decisions. Purg left and went to the human's cabin. He activated the visitor alert and heard the human come in. Purg walked into the cabin, but Oxidize was not in the entertainment or rest area. So, Purg went to the sanitation area. He stood in shock, staring at the strangest thing he had ever seen. The human was naked except for a groin cover that wrapped around its body. Its body was mostly bald, with some light fuzz that would take several months to grow into decent fur. Previously, Purg had only seen the human fully clothed, which revealed its head and hands. He had seen the fur at the top and back of the human's head along with the tiny tufts above its eyes. But now, Purg saw almost the whole human, and it was just odd. The only other spots that had actual fur were where its arms connected to its torso. The chest, arms, and legs had light fuzz, but the back, shoulders, ribs, and feet were completely bald. The feet were oddly shaped, lacking any sort of claws, heavy pads, or calluses to provide traction for walking and running. Purg also noticed some designs that had been applied to its skin. Some were pictures, some were words, and some appeared to be mystic glyphs. But the most bizarre thing was that the human had started growing fur on its face and was using some sort of tool to remove it. Perhaps it had some sort of skin infection that required medication to be applied directly to the bald skin. The human stopped removing the fur from its face, wiped its face with a small cloth, and greeted his guest. What's up, Purg? Purg had learned that this question was not relevant to height, elevated objects, or even ceilings in the sky, but was actually an inquiry about the present situation. The captain will speak to you on the bridge. Purg noticed that the human had removed only the fur that had started to grow on the lower half of its face, leaving the small tufts above its eyes intact. Oxidize, may I ask you questions about your body? The human gave a quick sigh and replied, you can ask anything you want if you use my name, Rusty. Why is that so difficult? Purg blinked. Perhaps one day the ship will have a more sophisticated AI that will translate into your specific dialect. Rusty sat at the edge of his bed and started getting dressed. Purg had always seen the human almost fully covered, wearing far more clothing than other crew members, and now he understood why. The poor bald creature must be freezing. As Purg watched Rusty getting dressed, the multiple clothing layers were unusual but understandable. How did you lose so much fur? Were you exposed to radiation? Why do you remove fur? Are you scheduled for surgery that would require depilation? Are you aware that you did not remove the fur over your eyes? Was that intentional or an oversight? Purg, the mammal-like alien, was bursting with questions, some bizarre and all fairly personal. Rusty didn't mind, as curiosity was natural when dealing with aliens. Additionally, Purg's people, who resembled otters and were only waist-high, were too cute to be offended by. Slow down, Purg, one at a time. Yes, humans are mammals. I have the normal amount of hair for a human. This is just how we look. The hair removal from my face is traditional, leaving the eyebrows, Rusty pointed at his eyebrows, is normal. Occasionally, some subcultures on my world will remove eyebrows too, but it looks weird if you ask me. Rusty was getting dressed, putting on socks, a work jumpsuit with several pockets, and boots that laced up. He chose a t-shirt to wear under the jumpsuit and added a belt. Purg, excited to see an alien up close and willing to answer questions, eagerly anticipated sharing this information with his people at dinner. Are you usually cold? Does your kind have skin of different colors? What sort of environment is your natural habitat? Do your females have similar fur? Do your young have fur? What life stage are you in? It was assumed that you are an adult, but your fur is similar to an infant. Are you an adult or perhaps a juvenile? How long does your fur grow? Is this your summer or winter coat? Does your species wear so much clothing because you cannot grow enough fur, or did you previously have more fur but shed it because you wear clothing instead? Is there any fur under your groin covering? The markings on your skin appear to be artificial. Are they temporary or permanent? Are they religious or family markings? Do females have such markings? Rusty chuckled. Purg was usually calm, efficient, diplomatic, dependable, and proactive in a completely innocuous way. Seeing Purg so excited and animated was adorable, like a boy watching a construction site. Some questions were surprisingly personal, but Purg was incapable of being offensive. Rusty had to suppress the urge to pet Purg and give him a little scratch behind the ears. He answered Purg's questions while gathering a few assorted tools to put in his pockets. Females actually have less hair than men. Nails and body hair are what you see, it doesn't get longer. The hair on our heads and faces can get quite long, over half a meter. Yes, our hair loses color as we age. Yes, I am an adult. Sometimes I get cold. Rusty glanced at the chronometer. Didn't you say the captain was looking for me? Purg glanced at the chronometer as well. Ah, yes, you are correct. But may I ask one more question? Rusty smiled. Shoot, Purg. Purg was momentarily puzzled. Often, the human said things that made no sense and sometimes sounded potentially hostile but clearly weren't. The easiest way to deal with this was to simply ignore the odd thing. May I touch your fur? Rusty's eyebrows lifted in surprise. He sat on the edge of his bed so Purg could reach his hair. Sure, go ahead. Rusty was even more surprised when Purg reached out his paw and stuck it into Rusty's armpit, wiggling his digits in the hair. Rusty flinched and laughed from the tickling. Purg then quickly touched Rusty's shoulder where there was no hair but some decorative markings. It didn't rub off, so it appeared to be permanent. Rusty finished dressing quickly, answering a couple more questions. Purg had produced a data tablet and was rapidly tapping away. Purg seemed to have an endless supply of data tablets and always had useful information, no matter the situation. As Purg and Rusty walked to the bridge, Rusty answered a few more questions, with Purg tapping away nonstop. When Rusty and Purg got to the bridge, Captain Vo and the rest of the bridge crew turned to stare at them, or more specifically, at Rusty. There were endless rumors and speculations about humans, and Rusty was no exception. Some rumors had been proven, some disproven. The one consistent thing was that a human was guaranteed to say or do something bizarre. Oxidize, Purg has given you information regarding proper behavior for the Menics. Is there any part of that information that is difficult to comprehend or objectionable to apply? Captain Vo asked. Rusty shrugged. Seems pretty straightforward. My sister is into all that astrology mumbo-jumbo, so I've just learned to smile and nod. Rusty glanced around the bridge, noticing the other crew members always seemed to stare at him, expecting him to perform tricks. Vo chittered approvingly. It is agreeable that we have reached consensus so easily. I was unaware that humans practiced astrology. It is most fortunate that your own family has this religious preference and finds it so agreeable. That's not what Rusty meant. Well, actually, sure, Vo, why not? Rusty said. Tell you what, I'm going down to the loading bay. Let me know if you need anything. He went down to the loading bay and storerooms, double-checking empty cargo space and safety devices. He was not looking forward to this. Weird aliens were one thing, but Supreme at Space Station 6SA, SS6, was something else entirely. That's what Rusty called the shuttle coordinator there. Rusty had been a Terra Marine, and SS6 was also a human military veteran. The Space Force saw the Terra Marines as pampered, soft, coddled, and entitled with zero common sense. Space Force considered Terra morons to be lower-evolved humans, licking paint off walls, fighting like toddlers, and occupying themselves by picking their noses and butts, usually with the same finger. The only thing that Rusty and SS6 agreed on was that any civilian who ever dared to insult any part of the military deserved the full wrath of all military members in the immediate vicinity. Rusty had an ongoing dispute with SS6, the shuttle coordinator. Shuttle coordinator, humph. Fancy title for sitting around watching other people work, Rusty thought. SS6 believed he should determine the order in which cargo loads would be sent to ships. The problem with that was, depending on the configuration and equipment of the receiving ship, it could range from a minor inconvenience to an expensive disaster. Things needed to be unloaded a certain way, and that way wasn't dictated by the laziness and ego of a desk jockey. Once the Noala docked with Station 6, Rusty went with the captain, Perg, the contracts and currency specialist, and the medical specialist to meet the Menic. The Noala had never transported Menic before, so a review of their allergens and potentially communicable infections was in order, following standard galactic procedures. There had been numerous attempts to create a comprehensive database to replace the current screening protocol. However, with the multitude of creatures interacting in diverse environments, developing an all-encompassing database proved to be nearly impossible. As a result, such databases were only considered basic guidelines, and consulting a medical specialist remained the most effective process. In the transport area, the Nogal crew, Menics representatives, and employees of Station 6 gathered. This was where Menics equipment and supplies were being loaded into shuttles. SAS SS6, along with other station employees, was present. He and Rusty exchanged hard stares without blinking. The Menics acknowledged the station crew first with a formal goodbye, "May you find fortuitous omens and a clear path in the stars." The leader of the station crew awkwardly responded, "Good luck and be safe." The Menics then greeted the Noala crew, expressing anticipation for the intersection of their life paths. Perg, trying to find a culturally acceptable response on his data tablet, observed the Menics giving each other awkward stares. Rusty, impatient to start, especially with SAS-6 giving him the evil eye, blurted out, "Happy birthday," influenced by his astrology-obsessed sister. The Menics chirped pleasantly, tapping their toenails on the floor, and their leader quickly approved the work agreement without much scrutiny. Vo-On perceived that Oxidize, in his usual peculiar manner, had somehow charmed the Menics, who chittered approvingly. Loading the cargo was a challenging task, especially with SAS-6 seemingly determined to do everything in the most inefficient way possible. By dinner break, Rusty was extremely grouchy. Vo-On approached Rusty, seeking his opinion on contributing to achieving consensus about the worlds in the Quet system. Rusty, puzzled, recalled that the Dinari and Unla were always fighting over that territory but didn't know much more. Vo-On, expressing his government's frustration with the unending conflict, mentioned the possibility of enlisting other species' help in exchange for favorable trade agreements. Rusty, wide-eyed, advised vehemently against involving Earth, warning of humanity's lack of moderation, especially in war. He begged Vo-On to leave Earth out of it. Vo-On, after a long series of clicks, assured Rusty that his opinion would be fully considered. Returning to the bridge, Vo-On contemplated the strong animosity between Oxidize and the human shuttle coordinator, suspecting they might be from warring tribes. However, both were in complete agreement about the folly of involving Earth. Other human crew members on the Noala echoed this sentiment, emphasizing the catastrophic consequences of such an action. To achieve a broader consensus, Vo-On decided to consult the Menics, who would have a unique perspective due to their religious beliefs. While the crew performed efficiently, Vo-On saw no immediate need for mediation and went to speak to the Menics, collecting their people and personal effects from the station. He was surprised to find Rusty in one of the returning shuttles, exuding hostility pheromones mixed with perspiration from the day's labor. Rusty explained that he needed to see for himself what was coming, frustrated with the shuttle coordinator's incompetence. Vo-On, uneasy but understanding the need for consensus, instructed the shuttle pilot to inform the Menics of his wish for an immediate audience upon arrival and to summon Perg and Mong to the shuttle for immediate departure. Rusty, though frustrated, complied. Vo-On noted that Nju, the contracts and currency specialist, might provide Rusty with advice, while Purg's presence could help ease tensions due to an observed social pattern where larger mammals found smaller mammals' presence enjoyable. Vun speculated that perhaps larger mammals unconsciously viewed smaller mammals as offspring. This might explain why their demeanor tended to be gentler and even protective towards smaller mammals. While Purg might not have had any professional relevance, his presence could provide emotional soothing, potentially de-escalating the interaction between Oxidize and the shuttle coordinator. Oxidize seemed particularly agreeable towards Purg. Purg, M, and 3 of her husbands boarded the shuttle. M, being an arachnid, practiced polyandry, meaning she had multiple husbands. Wherever M went, at least 2 of her husbands were also present, constantly vying to be her next chosen mate. Rusty found it bizarre that M, being female, easily towered over her husbands who were in constant cooperative competition with each other, hoping to be chosen for mating. However, being chosen was a grim fate as M would kill the chosen husband during mating and weave him into a preservation web for her offspring to eat when they hatched. Their species saw it as an honor, but to Rusty, it was a nightmare. He even joked that some men he knew who had gone through nasty divorces might prefer this arrangement. On the station, the interaction between Rusty and the shuttle coordinator was as bad as feared. The air was thick with aggression hormones, and shouts of profanities and insults echoed off the walls. Rusty even made obscene gestures towards the shuttle coordinator's office while the coordinator barked orders over the intercom to the loading area. At that precise moment, Vun and the Menic representative arrived at the loading area. A forklift operator, intimidated by the tension, turned suddenly with his cargo. The vehicle's wheel caught the side of a shuttle ramp, tipping the forklift and damaging the battery that supplied the magnetic restraining clamps. Large cargo barrels spilled off the platform, and Rusty saw one of M's husbands standing dangerously close, frozen in fear. Corporal Robert Rusty Hauser, a United Earth Terra Marine, sprang into action. His senses heightened, he moved with incredible speed despite the bright lights and loud noises. His heart pounded, and he began sweating as his body moved instinctively. Time seemed to slow down as he ran towards M's husband, getting hit and knocked down by heavy barrels but quickly scrambling to his feet. He felt intense pain in his left side and lower right leg and foot but continued running. He reached M's husband and flung him towards M. He then heard a scream from the forklift operator trapped in the fallen vehicle. Rusty ran to the forklift, wiping blood, which he thought was sweat, from his eyes. He was vaguely aware of alarms and shouted orders coming over the intercom. With a scream of pain, he lifted the side of the forklift cage so others could pull the operator to safety. His ribs felt broken, and his hands were slick with blood as he shouted at the rescuers to hurry. As he shifted his grip, he realized the intercom voice was shouting about a live wire. Electricity shot through his body, causing excruciating pain, but Rusty refused to let go, determined not to let the man die. The others finally rescued the operator, whose appendage and tail had been crushed. Rusty dropped the forklift and hobbled over to the operator, shouting for a corpsman. He applied direct pressure to a large gash on the operator until emergency medical specialists arrived. Exhausted and in pain, Rusty reassured Purg, who scurried over looking alarmed, that everything would be okay. He took 2 steps before collapsing, his body hitting the deck with a sickening thud. Purg visited Rusty in the ship's medical center later. Rusty, now out of the gel tank used to support injured bodies, was recovering rapidly. Purg marveled at Rusty's resilience, noting the human's miraculous survival and rapid healing despite his severe injuries. The crew members were constantly attempting to solicit gossip from the medical specialist regarding Rusty's recovery. There was widespread speculation that Rusty might be genetically enhanced, but the medical specialist had conducted numerous scans using various techniques and confirmed that Rusty's DNA was unaltered. Rusty was lightly dozing, and the medical specialist reported that Rusty seemed exceptionally skilled at sleeping, able to rest comfortably regardless of bright illumination or intermittent noise. The only exception was if Rusty's entertainment monitor was turned off. Rusty insisted that it remain active at all times, and if a medical attendant turned it off, Rusty would immediately awaken and object, saying, "Hey, I was watching that." Even when it was pointed out that the growl and barking noises Rusty made during deep sleep were much louder than the monitor, Rusty still stubbornly insisted on keeping the monitor on. Rusty seemed to sense Purg's approach because he woke up groggily and greeted Purg with, "Hey little buddy, what's up?" Rusty reached over and gently petted Purg's head and gave him a little scratch behind the ear. Purg found it unusual but somewhat soothing, as it reminded him of the way his mother had groomed him. It was amazing that this powerful creature could touch so gently. Rusty's hand dropped, and he apologized, saying, "Sorry if that was inappropriate. The drugs doc has me on got me feeling good." Purg nodded understandingly, noting that the touch was unexpected but not offensive. He acknowledged that Rusty had always been respectful in his own way, and that medical narcotics usually produced unusual behavior. Rusty chuckled and asked, "Good, we're still square. So, what can I do for you, Purg?" Purg held up 2 data tablets and informed Rusty that the accident had been formally reviewed, and no fault was found on the part of the Noala or crew. There would be no disciplinary procedures or documentation despite the damage to Menic property, and Rusty would receive full compensation for the work. Rusty gave a brief smile and let his head fall back to his pillow, saying, "Cool." Purg ignored the reply, interpreting it as another nonsensical human utterance but understanding it to be favorable. Purg continued, explaining that Captain V. Owen had spoken at length with the station owner, and they agreed that Rusty and the shuttle coordinator were simply incapable of reaching a consensus. Therefore, there would be an intermediary between them in all situations going forward. This arrangement might provide slight inconvenience, as it was determined that they would work separately and also take rest, entertainment, and meals separately. Rusty snorted, feeling almost insulted that he was being treated like a toddler who wouldn't keep his hands to himself. However, he was relieved to be getting full pay for the job and not having to deal with SAS-6 anymore. Purg then held out a data tablet with pictures of various monkeys, indicating that he had more questions about Rusty's species and had done some research. He mentioned that the scientific community believed humans naturally evolved from these creatures, but he doubted this theory given the differences between humans and these other species. Purg believed that there was an early common ancestor and that an unknown outside entity had intervened to accelerate evolution, resulting in the creation of humans. Rusty chuckled, impressed by Purg's thorough research. He remarked, "Purg, I think you are the first person to ever prove the existence of God by believing in evolution. Usually, it's the other way around." Purg was indeed a master of research and was so endearing that Rusty felt comfortable answering any of his questions. Rusty then asked how much longer until they reached their destination, mentioning that the doctor was a worrywart and insisted he would still be on bed rest. Rusty wanted to know if he could at least operate a loader and help direct traffic. Purg hesitated, shuffling his data pads before replying. "We will be meeting with the Ballon Captain V. Wren's ship in 9 days. You will remain aboard the ship until it docks at Space Station 9. After the Noala has delivered the Menic supplies and personnel, we will rendezvous at the station where you will be reintegrated with the crew." Rusty was baffled and asked why. Purg explained that while the Menics were very impressed and appreciative of Rusty's actions during the accident, they were also quite frightened. There were rumors about human aggression and combat abilities. After extensive discussion, the Menics decided to ban humans from their system for safety reasons. Rusty was in shock but quickly calmed himself, apologizing to Purg for his reaction. He couldn't believe they would make such a decision and found it insane. Purg reassured Rusty, explaining that it wasn't because the others got hurt. He showed Rusty the accident investigation report, which confirmed that Mang's husband suffered only superficial injuries and had already recovered. The forklift operator would have died or suffered debilitating injuries without Rusty's assistance. Rusty's actions had undoubtedly prevented further injuries and property damage. However, seeing humans in a full rage, far exceeding normal performance limitations despite debilitating injuries, alarmed the Menics about the potential for disaster if humans were allowed in their system. Rusty stared at Purg in shock, blinking aggressively, an action that made Purg nervous. Purg continued, explaining that such bans were not unusual and were usually between warring species or carriers of infection. He identified 8 other worlds that had banned humans and compiled a list for Rusty's reference, placing the tablet next to the entertainment monitor when Rusty didn't take it. Rusty finally spoke, feeling conflicted. He had saved 2 people, prevented cargo damage, and endured a brutal beating, yet the thank you was to banish his entire species. He wasn't sure if he should feel flattered or insulted. Purg thought for a moment and suggested that Rusty should feel flattered. He mentioned speaking with M, who said that if Rusty were the correct species, he would absolutely be her first choice to mate. Rusty did a double take, his eyes crossing slightly, realizing that no matter how weird the universe got, it could always get weirder.